Right, so we're here for session 2. I mean, last week was just really just getting to know one another and saying hello and looking at heritage as a just thought, just start thinking about heritage. This week we're looking purely at contemporary black music. Now, if those were there last week, you might remember Kevin made some brilliant points. The two things in particular he spoke about was how hidden black music is in the city, and yet there's a lot going on. And the other is, he spoke about the people who move and shake, who actually influence. I think Kevin's an influencer about who help music happen. So I'm delighted to introduce you to Kofi Owusu, who I think is quietly, for at least the last 15 years, gone about being a really important influencer in black music. He's also a musician, he's a producer, he's a film producer. I love the idea that he's been mentoring young artists as well, and he's really integrated. And what I want Kofi to do to speak about today, particularly the first half, is to talk about how he sees black music in the city through his own eyes and his own experiences. And the second half, he's going to do a bit of mixing for us, and hopefully you get a chance to do a bit of mixing and understand how the studio works. What Kofi does that is quite different from anyone else on this course, he's not limiting himself to music. Music is the drive, the absolute drive, but he's also looking at film. And when we met last week or the week before, there was games and apps, and that kind of interrelationship of how you can use music to drive another creativity, and another creativity drives music. And I'm delighted we're actually in a studio, because I never got access to a studio until I was about 30. I didn't know what one looked like. So it's great that this studio is right in the heart of the city. The other point I want to make, just before I hand over to Kofi, is we spoke about the built environment and how Liverpool's massive economic rise and huge decline left a legacy of buildings. We're in a fantastic building. That is part of the story that Kevin mentioned, and the Baltic Creative Triangle. So without further ado, I'm delighted to hand you over to Kofi. And what I suggested is we start at the front, Kofi, and tell us how you got involved in music.
Okay, it was a good intro that, by the way, thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm Kofi, artist name is Kof, which is obviously just short for Kofi. Some people call me Kof, I don't know how they get that mixed up, but my earliest memory of making music was, or should I say my earliest memory of music was in the household. My mum and dad would always used to play like a lot of reggae, a lot of soul music. I was heavily into like Michael Jackson. So I used to sit in front of the TV trying to do all the dance moves, mimicking the singing and all that kind of stuff. And I remember one time, which is a bit of a weird one, my dad had this brand new stereo and he used to always blast his music. I remember he wasn't in, I must have come home, I don't know where I was at. And I played some music on his stereo, and he came in afterwards, and there was like a little light on the stereo, so he knew that basically I'd been on the stereo, and he went crazy, absolutely crazy. And I never understood why at the time, but I think that kind of gave me even more of a curious wonder about like, why was this so special to him? And I think my real deep interest in music started coming from like memories like that. The first time I kind of realised I could sing, or that I was like proper into it, is we went on a family holiday to Butlins. I don't know if you've ever been to Butlins or heard about Butlins. It's like a low budget holiday for like, it's like a caravan park kind of thing. And my mum was like, oh, there's a talent competition. My mum was like, oh, why didn't you get involved in the talent competition? It'd be great. I was like, nah, I was too shy. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a £5 if you do it. I was like, all right, cool. At that time, a £5 was a lot of money, you know what I mean? Well, not that much, but. So anyway, I ended up doing the talent show, sang, and I ended up winning. And we won a holiday back to Butlins again, so it wasn't a great prize, but it was good enough.
What did you sing?
It was a song called I Swear by a group called, oh no, definitely not Backstreet Boys, no. I think they were called, were they All For One maybe, I think they were called. So I ended up winning that one. Won a holiday back, and then it was like the grand final. So we went, and I ended up getting beat by this other kid who was singing this song called Delilah. Why, Delilah? Yeah, yeah. And that was probably like my first disappointment in music. So although it was my first like joy, it was also my first disappointment. But from then, I kind of just went around. Music was always in the household, like I say. I grew up in East London as well. So I was born in Liverpool, moved to London, grew up there. And the music scene there was quite influential in terms of like house and garage music, drum and bass, and especially grime, which came from East London as well. So that was a heavy influence on the stuff I was listening to in school. I wrote my first song at 14, and it was called You Go Through, and it was with one of my friends on the estate. And that was actually the first time I'd wrote a rap as well. So on that song I was singing and I was rapping, and that was again one of the earliest times of me thinking, okay, I can do more than just one thing. The facilities then wasn't how it is now. You can't really now you can download music software. Anybody can really produce or create songs at home. Them times you couldn't really do that. It was quite hard, so it was only studios where you could do that kind of thing. A few years later, probably when I was about 19, my dad was a bit of an alcoholic, so the home environment wasn't the best. So when I turned 19, I just wanted to come back to Liverpool. Liverpool, I had like an affinity. Like obviously I was born here, grew up, I was here till I was like 6, then moved to London. But since then, I'd always just want to get back to Liverpool. Are you guys from Liverpool? Yeah. We spoke about this last week. There's a thing about when you're from Liverpool, wherever you can go to in the world, there's always something that kind of pulls you back to Liverpool. I don't know, it's just like a feeling, like an energy. And that's what I had, so I always wanted to come back to Liverpool. So as soon as I got the chance to come back, I came back. And I wasn't really doing much music, but then I did start producing, and then I wrote this song. It was called Hard Times, and that was really just about my upbringing and stuff about my dad and stuff like that. But again, I didn't really have nowhere to record it. So me and my cousin, Yao, who you'll probably meet in a couple of weeks, we found this recording studio that was not far away from where I was staying. It's called The Bus Stop. So we booked a day in the studio to record this song. And I remember when it came to the day of the studio session, a friend of mine said, "Oh, I'm working for Hollyoaks. Would you like to be an extra on Hollyoaks?" And I was like, "Oh, I could get a bit of money here as well." Do you know what I mean? So I said to Yao, I was like, "I think I'm going to do this instead of going to the studio session." He was like, "No, listen, we booked this day in the studio. You've got to do it. You've got to do it." So I was like, "All right, fair enough." Bit my tongue. Anyways, ended up going down to the studio. We recorded this song. It came out really well. And someone who was in the studio said to me, "Oh, listen, we're doing a show. It's going to be rock bands, but we'd love to put you on." And this song was like hip hop. So I was really nervous. I was thinking, "Oh, I don't really want to do it. It's not really my type of vibe." In the end, I went along, done the show, got a great reaction. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, we're not really into that kind of stuff, but we liked your vibe." So again, that gave me like a bit more confidence as an artist. And from there, it was kind of weird. It was kind of all just kind of went quickly. Then I asked my cousin, thinking, "Oh, we're the big time because we've done our fair show and we've got good reviews." I was like, "Oh, would you manage me?" And at that time, I didn't even know what I needed a manager for. I probably didn't even need a manager at that time as well. But he was like, "Yeah, cool, let's do it." And from there, we created a company called Urbeatz, which was, I guess, an amalgamation of urban beats. And the thing with Liverpool, what we found, especially at that time, is that it was heavily centered on like indie bands, rock, dance music. And in terms of the urban, like hip hop, R&B, soul, the kind of stuff that we did, there was nothing really for that. There was nothing serving that. So what we did with Urbeatz, we kind of thought, okay, there's a little gap that we could probably fill. And we just kind of started doing it. We just hit the ground running. We started putting on our own events. One of the first events that we did was called Urban Infusion. So it was like an under 18s event. And we found a local bar in town called the Dragon Bar. I don't know if you remember that one. It's probably smaller than this room. But by this time we built up such a buzz that like it was packed. There was queues outside. When we actually started the event, there were people outside just listening from outside to get a vibe of the music. Do you know what I mean? So we really started getting a stronghold on the city early.
What was the scene like in Liverpool in terms of hip hop? Was there one?
At that time, I wouldn't say there was a scene. There wasn't like say how Liverpool is now, you could probably go to an indie event or an event like that on any given night of the week. For hip hop and R&B, there was nothing. As far as I know, we were the only people that were putting on events, like the only people. There may have been some other stuff going on, but even them times there wasn't social media how there is now, so you couldn't really see what was going on unless you seen like a flyer or heard word of mouth. That's the only time you was going to hear about some events that was going on. So at that time, it was only us and Urbeatz that were, as far as I'm aware, putting on events. So the scene was really like...
What was your audience like when you said it was Chocolate at the Dragon and other events? In terms of age group and background, what were they?
Well, to be fair, our very first event, which I missed out, was really just our friends and family that we'd invited to kind of come and just get the vibe. But after that, we slowly started getting around, and it was like from anything from like 13, 14 up to like mid-20s, late 20s, you know what I mean? Because the style of music that we'd done as well, you could cater to a bit of an older audience, and because there was nothing really out here for people to come and watch or listen to, even more so, we brought people in. One of the things that we started doing as well was through Urbeatz. My cousin, who again you'll meet, one of his old teachers, found out what we were doing and the kind of buzz that we were building up, and they were like, "Oh, could you bring Kof to the school, and could you teach our English students who are working on poetry and anthology and show them how rap kind of is the same as poetry, just with a beat, and kind of engage with them that way?" Because, you know, being in school, the teacher's just telling you all this stuff and you've got to read out the book, it can be quite boring, you know. So they'd bring us in, and we kind of started doing that quite a lot. And then it got to a point where we said to the teacher, like, okay, if we're going to come, can we do like a show at lunchtime? Teacher's like, oh yeah, fine, we'd love that. You know, it even gives the teachers a little bit of kudos as well. Do you know what I'm saying? Oh, we've got this guy that's coming down, he's going to perform for you. And I know at those times, that was amazing for us, because you'd have like 100, 200 students in the dinner hall, and we'd have them for half an hour, and we'd just be doing shows. And then that was like automatic link to some of our core audience, who then would come to the events, which is why we did a lot of under 18 events at that time as well. I love recording in the studio, and I love like writing a song, finding a piece of music, and then when you find a concept that you really enjoy and then you finish the track, that's a really great feeling, especially when you finish that last verse and it's like, oh yeah, I've done it. Because you can do your first verse. Do you write as well? Do you make music? Yeah. So you know when you got your first verse and everything's like cool, it's like, yeah, cool. And you've got your chorus, and it's like, oh yeah, this is banging. And it's like, oh, what am I gonna do for the second verse? Because I feel like I've put everything I wanted to say in the first verse now. So I find when I get to the end of a song, it's like a relief, like, yes, finally I've done it. Because as well, if you guys make music, you probably get in the same vein as like, I've got hundreds of songs, unfinished songs on my computer that I wish I'd finished, but it's just like, you just end up moving on to something else, like literally all the time. So I do love that aspect of the studio, but for me, I think performing and getting that feedback from the crowd and that energy, like there's a feeling that you can't get from anything else. And then to go one step further, when people are singing back the song to you, that's a whole nother experience. I mean, that the last part of that video there was in the Echo Arena, and it was supporting N-Dubs. Do you know, remember N-Dubs? Yeah. But this was when like they were at the height of their career almost. So they brought me on to support. And at that time, I knew that I had a buzz in the city from what we were doing, but I didn't know how big it was. So when everyone was singing a song back to me, it was like, I thought I was gonna faint. Like it was unreal for me. But best gigs, I'd say that was one of my favorite gigs. I've done like Glastonbury, stuff like that. I remember Glastonbury, a funny story is, it was the BBC introducing, it's just about new emerging artists. And I remember coming onto the stage and the guy introduced me, and there was probably like 2-3 people in the tent, and you could literally hear the claps, like 1 or 2 claps in the thing. I was like, oh my God, but it was being filmed, so it's like, you just gotta do your best. But by the end of my set, I think it was like a 20-minute set, 25-minute set, the whole tent was just full of people who had like, been walking past, hearing what was going on, and just came in, and you can see from some of the clips, like it was bouncing, it was going off. And that again gave me like super confidence as an artist. And yeah, like I say, that energy of performing is like, there's nothing that tops that for me personally.
So you've got this well, in a way, you've got kind of a parallel career. You've got Young Kof, and there's the Urbeatz stuff. It'd be great if you could tell us about some of the campaign and work of Urbeatz and why you got involved in that. And there's two in particular. There's the anti-bullying and there's the anti-racism and anti-Walker.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So, at the time, I was kind of making like fun music, or what I would class as fun music, upbeat, that kind of vibe. And something happened in the city with a kid called Anthony Walker. I don't know if you've heard of him about him before. He was murdered. It was a racist attack. It was quite brutal. And being in the city, you know, I've experienced racism on a few different occasions. So that situation hit quite hard to home, should I say? And Yao, my cousin, who also had used to play basketball with Anthony as well, so he also had a bit of a link there as well. And I remember vividly, we were in the studio for like 2 days straight overnight as well, because we'd been working on a project. And we came out to get some food, and then it was just everywhere in the newspapers about what had happened. We went back to the studio and we were talking about it for hours, like how crazy it was and how it's still going on. And one of the songs that I'd just written for that project, I ended up scrapping all the lyrics and then writing a brand new song about that tragedy and about Anthony and about kind of the black experience in Liverpool. Because bearing in mind, where I grew up in London, East London, the estate where I lived was full of like, there's black people, white people, Asians, Caribbean, so many different cultures on the estate where I lived. So to come back to Liverpool and it be quite a divide was a bit of almost like a culture shock to me, which was crazy because when I first lived here and I used to live in Norris Green, I was like the only black kid in the school. So again, going to London was a culture shock and then coming back was another culture shock. So anyway, when that happened, we ended up writing a song called Where Did We Go Wrong? And somehow, I'm not sure how it got to Anthony's family, but they heard it and like were just touched by it. And I think a lot of people who heard it were touched by it. And they ended up inviting us to kind of one of the events that they were doing in Anthony's name. And the way the song kind of hit with people and responded to people was crazy for me. And it kind of shifted the direction of music that I was making from the kind of light-hearted, fun pop stuff to like a lot more social content. Like even them times you hear like the N-word used a lot in hip hop and rap. And I'd used it every now and again, I think just because I'm influenced by some of the other artists. But even that was another change of me like, I need to drop using the N-word in my music because we're performing in schools saying this and the kids are saying it back to us and it's cool, but really what are we kind of teaching them in that aspect? And that led us on to doing a lot of community work and like a lot of workshops based around anti-racism in the Northwest and across the country. And that song, they still use it in schools as work for their own kind of educational purposes as well. So,
couple of questions. As a consequence of doing that kind of work and get drawn into that world, I think communities look for role models. Were people starting to come forward now from the black communities looking to you to say, how can I get into music and stuff like that?
Quite a bit. I mean, a lot of the time he was doing like I say, those kind of workshops and a lot of kind of like, I don't want to say public speaking, but events based around these kind of topics. And that all kind of played into what we was doing with Urbeatz in terms of educating the message of I guess, again, the black experience. So it did feel like things were starting to get better around them times. A lot more people, like in terms of the schools, we were going to so many different schools, like I say, across the Northwest, to kind of spread that message, which was really good. And I'm glad that we were able to do that because not only did I feel like we were changing some of the views, again, like I say, it also made me a bit more of I feel like a better artist socially in terms of the songs I was writing, even just thinking about who's going to be listening to the music, what kind of message am I sharing with the music that I'm making.
Yeah, I mean, the phrase that gets used a lot is black consciousness. Did it change the writing to the point where that was all you do, or did you want to be known as somebody who could cover a whole range of emotions?
Yeah, it did. I kind of, at the time, I kind of I don't want to say I got lost down that path because it was powerful what I was doing, and for me it was really valuable. But then when it come to like performing at shows, I didn't really get that much fun singing those kind of songs. And if you see some of like the stuff I showed you before, like I enjoy being like quite vibrant on the stage, for lack of a better word. So I found that I'd be doing these really slow songs, quite political, and the energy wasn't there for me. But then I just realised that, well, you know, I can do all these other types of music, so why like pigeonhole yourself? And I think that was probably one of the times where I kind of started like understanding my potential as an artist. It's like you'll find like we love, as people who listen to music, we love so many different types of genres. So there's no reason for us to just do one. And that's when I just thought, let me just do whatever I can do. Let me do the social stuff. Let me do the fun stuff. Let me blend it and like just be as creative as possible, really. Not have any boundaries, not limit myself.
You mentioned genres.
Mm-hmm.
It would be great if you could go through the kind of genres you're interested in and kind of are connected to primarily the black community, but not exclusively.
Mm-hmm.
So we spoke about hip hop,
Yeah.
rap. So
Yeah.
could you go through how you define some of those genres and your interest in it? Because there was drill you mentioned, and
Yeah.
you know, it's interesting to know how people, what's the difference between drill and grime, and where do they come from the street?
They definitely come from the streets, and I guess the inner city urban experience. It's quite energetic. I think that a lot of that music comes out from a place of pain and being quite, also out of a place of poverty. I even want to say segregation as well. Sometimes with those genres of music, some of the artists have an affinity to hold on to those genres and kind of not being as accepting of anyone else coming out and using that genre in the same kind of way like a country music would be. You know, a few years ago, like country music is quite a white dominated space, but when you had like artists like Nas X come out, there was issues about whether he should actually be allowed to perform at the Grammys or whatever, or this isn't really country music. Well, it sounds exactly the same, it's just the skin colour is different. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and that's the kind of boundary with music I've always like hated, because like it's music, anybody can enjoy it, anybody can do it. So yeah, I mean that's the basis of where those kind of genres of music come from. I mean, the difference between grime and drill, it's a bit weird because they're both the same tempo. I don't really know what the difference would be. Drill is more of an evolution of grime, but everything is almost like a cycle as well. So it's really hard for me to describe that one. Hip hop is probably like a little bit more wider in terms of the content. I think with grime and drill, it's very heavy, it's very raw sounding, whereas hip hop can be a bit more polished. And R&B, I mean, the R&B that I used to listen to was always about love. It was always quite nice and like smooth, you know. And then of late, it's kind of merged with the hip hop sound, and it's become a little bit more, again, more raw. So if you look at artists like Tory Lanez is not a good example at the moment, but in fact, yeah, you're onto Tory Lanez, yeah. His R&B is quite edgy. It's not too la-di-da-di kind of smooth. If that makes sense. Yeah.
So, tell us how you feel about the black music scene in the city now, and some of the artists that are coming through, and who you've worked with, and your role in collaborating with them.
Yeah. I mean, I think at this point in time now in the city, it's in a good space. It's not where it ultimately can be in terms of level, but I think one of the things about being up here is that we're always a few years behind what's going on in London, whether that be hip hop. So I mean, a few years ago, you could rap, you could be from London and did rap in an American accent because that's what they were influenced by. And if you used to rap in a London accent, people would be like, "Wow, why are you doing that? Yeah, you're just copying off the Americans." And then slowly but surely, with artists like Giggs, the London accent started becoming more acceptable for rap music in this country. But then if you were rapping with like a Manchester accent or a Scouse accent, that would be like, "Oh, you can't do that, you can't rap like that." Do you know what I'm saying? But of late, say with artists like H, where now the Manchester accent's more accepted in rap. And then of even more recent, got artists like Hazy, who like people would say Birkenhead. You know, it's funny that because loads of people who came through the studio were like, oh, this kid Hazy, he's putting Liverpool on the map, Liverpool on the map. And then as soon as he was from Birkenhead, they were like, oh, he's not really Scouse though, he's not really from Liverpool, you know what I mean? He's not really from Liverpool. Which I used to just find like super funny because it's like 5 minutes down the road, but I understand it as well. So yeah, so with our...
of Liverpool.
It's crazy. Yeah. But yeah, so the accent is more accepted in a UK kind of scene, which is great. And there's artists like A Star as well, who's doing quite a bit, and then there's a guy called Trems who's doing quite well, who's done stuff with like Drake that's not out, which is big. One of the things as well that used to annoy me was there's a thing called GRM Daily. Have you heard of that before? No. So it's like a platform for hip hop, R&B, grime, drill, all that kind of stuff. But it was centered around just artists in London, which was dope in terms of evolving the scene and like UK music. But then they invented this other like offshoot site which was called GRM North, and for me it kind of pissed me off a little bit because it was like, well, we're all part of the UK, we're all fighting the same struggle of UK music trying to be heard. So why can we all not just be on this GRM? Why does the North artists have to be on this separate site that people aren't really feeling, don't really know about, it's not really being promoted? And I remember saying something to them like we don't want this GRM North. But that was one of the things that made me think, actually, you know, we don't have anything up here to call our own, that we can push our own artists. So that's what I kind of started to try and do once I developed the studio. So with the likes of A Star, with the likes of Trems, I don't know if you've heard of an artist called P3Ls. She's like a new artist. She first came here when she was like 15. She was recently on the BBC, The Rap Game. So she's another artist who's starting to get known quite nationally. There's Codge, Philly D. There's loads now. So I say that to say the scene now is much more healthy. There's a lot more going on. People are a lot more creative and a lot more, what's the word? They're happy to embody the Scouse experience and put that and show this is what we make. We're not copying what you do, or our sound's not like yours, but this is what we're doing. Yeah.